If you were asked to think of a character that represents every aspect of yourself, who would it be? Could you see yourself and your personal experiences as a stand-in for theirs, or would you consider them to be a more symbolic, dramatized version of your personal struggles? If you're feeling a certain dissonance with the characters you may think of and yourself, that's completely okay. Not everyone has a life that's as dramatic as Shakespeare, at least I'd hope not. Carl Gustav Jung was an early member of the scientific psychology community and was commonly credited with the conceptualization of the persona. A persona, as it pertains to Jung, is a consciously created identity built from the collective psyche to mediate the conscience of oneself and the acceptable conduct to be used with others. This mask, as Jung would put it, is the face we show the world as well as a general conceptualization of oneself. The character that you may have thought of in association with yourself was probably closely aligned with your vision of yourself and the vision of you that you provide to others, your persona. In Atlas's Persona 5 Royal, this concept of oneself being represented by another character is seen brought to an extreme through the namesake concept of the series, the persona. Hi, I'm Human-Shaped Raccoon, and there will be significant spoilers for both Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal in this video. If you haven't played the latter title, I implore you to do so before watching this video. I promise that you'll get more out of it if you're aware of what is happening. Thank you. Let's continue. Persona 5's central conflict revolves around you, the leader of the reality-hopping Phantom Thieves, utilizing an alternate reality, the metaverse, fueled and influenced by the cognitions of society and individuals alike, to force the despicable human blights on society to admit their crimes and ultimately alter the apocalyptic fate that has been unfairly selected for you. In the Persona series, the various characters' abilities, called personas, and their powers with them are derived from their growth and confidence. The persona is commonly a sign that the character in question has grown and shed the constraints that they feel are holding them back societally, socially, and traumatically. A persona is a manifestation of a persona user's personality, and due to it being tied directly to their soul and sense of self, is the truest and most legitimate possible reflection of each character's personality. Commonly, a persona is represented by a character or object from folklore, mythology, or literature that has distinct sentience. For example, our protagonist's persona at the beginning of the game is Arsène, a depiction of Maurice Leblanc's Arsène Lupin, a gentleman thief whose appearances almost always involve a strong question of justice and the specifics that are implied by it. As the protagonist, you'll be committing illegal acts in the name of public good, much like Arsène Lupin in his source material. Arsène and Joker can be seen as reflective in one another, and therefore is an accurate portrayal of Joker's personality. Since each of the party members are directly related to the persona they wield, the persona's source material can provide interesting information relating to the characterization of that character. Join me as we take a ride through literature, mythology, and folklore to examine just why do the Phantom Thieves wield the personas that they do. To most accurately assess the similarities between persona and persona user, we'll be primarily looking to link events and symbolism from the persona's source material to the events of Persona 5. This means that we would research novels that feature Arsène Lupin for Joker, Carmen for Anne, and so on. All members of the Phantom Thieves receive a second form of their persona, unlocked by reaching rank 10 in your party members' confidants, as well as a third in the Royal. The third, however, tends to be a more stylized version of their original persona under a slightly different name. So, unless it represents unique information about the character, we'll be largely considering them to be extensions of their first persona. If you know any other information about the media in question or have any further evidence to provide, please comment down below. I'd like to take a second to make a disclaimer. I've researched all of the source material of the characters in as much detail as I thought appropriate. Naturally, of course, the mythologies and cultures that these characters, deities, and otherwise images have originated from are generally not my own. I am not Greek, nor am I Japanese, nor am I Chinese, or Egyptian, or Hispanic, or several other of the cultures represented in these personas. I'd like to assure you that I have done my best to research and interpret these stories that are so important to people across the world in a way that is conscious of the time that they were published, as well as the biases that the media may hold that are unacceptable today. However, despite my best efforts, my struggles as an assigned male-at-birth white person who has lived in his hometown his entire life will inevitably bar me from knowing the full depth of the characters and their experiences. Specifically for the female characters of the game, I will not be able to fully comprehend the scale and effect that misogyny and systemic barriers have on the writing of these characters. If you interpret the characters differently than I do, I implore you to please put your feelings in the comments section. I'd love to learn more and broaden my perspectives, both for the quality of my future content, as well as the quality of my character. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's begin. Let's begin our journey with the arguably most unique member of the Phantom Thieves, the protagonist Joker. Joker may be a mostly silent protagonist, but that isn't to say that he's a blank slate. It can be attested that the key to his characterization lies not in how he acts, but the media that inspires his design and surrounds him in the presentation of Persona 5. Joker's persona is Arsène, inspired by the French author Maurice Leblanc's character Arsène Lupin. Arsène Lupin is a gentleman thief, which means that Lupin is a character who is affluent, well-mannered, and incredibly skilled at his craft. Arsène Lupin is commonly cited as an inspiration to any media that uses the phantom thief trope. Phantom thief meaning any gentleman/lady thief in specifically Japanese media. One example of a phantom thief is Lupin III, the grandson of our character at hand, Arsène Lupin. Arsène Lupin is a character who is difficult to pin down. The only absolute information about him is that he does exactly as he pleases because simply no one can stop him from doing so. His abilities in escape artistry, trickery, social manipulation, sleight of hand, pickpocketing, and practically every other skill that could be remotely useful to a thief of such a caliber are second to none. In canon, he is the greatest thief alive. He will be arrested should it please him. He will escape and even perform heists from within the prison, just whenever he finds it useful. Arsène, in his own words, in Chapter 2, Part 2 of Maurice Leblanc's Arsène Lupin, Gentleman Burglar, quote, will only remain in prison so long as it pleases him. This classy, rebellious atmosphere that surrounds Lupin translates extremely well to Joker's character. To provide a direct parallel to Lupin's story of coming a heist from prison, the Phantom Thieves' gamble on November 20th in-game reflects Lupin's signature propensity for escaping and planning. The thieves' slick social manipulation, use of the tools unique to them, information warfare, and eventual showboating return, all of which led and orchestrated by Joker, is dripping with Lupin's style. In the same chapter of Gentleman Burglar, Lupin states that he does not know exactly who he is any longer, as he must take on so many different personas during his heists. Joker has the ability of the Wild card, an ability given to each of the protagonists of the Persona series. This ability allows them to wield shadows as their personas. The song Beneath the Mask, which plays during exploration of certain parts of Tokyo, as well as regularly being utilized as the default background music in the game, has themes of personal disassociation within the lyrics. This can be seen clearly in lines such as, I'm a shapeshifter, what else should I be? Please don't take off my mask. And, a mirror right in front of me, that's where I find an empty glass, reflecting the sad truth. It's telling words not to be told. I need the mask. Considering that this song can be viewed to some extent as Joker's theme song, it makes sense that the lyrics in question apply to his mental state. Joker, when viewed through this lens, wishes to see himself as someone who did the right thing when defending that woman from Shido, but he is grappling with the fact that society sees that he has a crime on his record and refuses to see him as anything but a criminal. This depreciation of self-image, as well as his ability to literally take off the mask in the metaverse when utilizing his personas, very literally illustrates the same feeling that Arsène Lupin feels due to his heavily perverted view of himself. Despite the blank slate that may be assumed by being the protagonist for self-insert purposes, all of the connections to Lupin in Joker's behavior are very intentional. Upon utilizing Arsène for infusion, he states that, while I may disappear this moment, I shall always be at your side. This further solidifies that while Joker can swap between personas and by extension, images of himself at will, he will always be who he is at heart, a slick gentleman thief who simply has no time to operate on others' timetable. Satanael is Joker's ultimate persona he develops at the end of the game to rebel against Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth is the god of control who would wish to deprive humanity of all freedom and consign them to insanity, thus ending the world as we know it. Satanael is more commonly known as Satan, but not the living half-frozen up to his waist in the lowest circle of hell depiction the actual Satan persona is depicted as, originating from Dante's Inferno, Satanael is the archangel who rebelled against God, and is also an interpretation of Lucifer, the fallen angel in greater Christianity, as well as the being who oppresses Yaldabaoth in Gnosticism. Due to the game's final boss being Yaldabaoth but with a Y this time, it would only make sense that the natural opposition to Yaldabaoth, Satanael, who rebelled against the subjugation of humanity by the envious deity, would be Joker's ultimate persona. Satanael is also the title of Satan when he remained an angel, prior to the angel Michael stripping the L from his name and thus stripping him of his angelic status. This etymology further sets Joker's action in stone that what he's doing is the morally right thing to be doing in rebelling against Yaldabaoth. Due to the final palace being related almost exclusively to the mysteries of Mementos, Satanael is generally disconnected from the regular motivations of Joker. However, because Joker is doing the exact thing that Satanael did, which is to say rebelling against God in the interest of humanity's salvation, the connection isn't particularly hidden. The persona Satanael overall can be seen as a penultimate version of each iteration of Satan or Lucifer throughout various forms of media, as they all represent a divine rebellion. This serves to play on the aspects of cognition seen in Persona 5, as Satanael exists from the amalgamation of those other satanic figures for their representation of divine rebellion. Ryuji Sakamoto's primary persona is Captain Kidd, based on the real historical figure, Captain William Kidd. Ryuji in-game generally fills the friendly boy best friend who you first meet in the game role, a common occurrence in most mainline Persona titles. Ryuji is often brash, hard-headed, and impulsive, however he is loyal to a fault and wants nothing more than to ensure that his friends and family are okay, going so far as to perform great acts of self-sacrifice and putting himself in awkward social situations all for the good of his comrades and friends. Ryuji is a character plagued by his reputation. Various classmates and teachers alike warn you not to associate with Ryuji due to the reputation he's wrongly obtained after standing up for himself following poor treatment by Suguru Kamoshida, the villain coach for the track team. The team had been run ragged due to Kamoshida's questionable training being a ploy to weaken the track team and increase the influence given to Kamoshida, who normally coaches the volleyball team. Following this unfair treatment, Ryuji lashed out at Kamoshida in anger, which led to the track team's dissolving and resulted in Ryuji's leg being broken, a physical memento of his impulsivity negatively affecting those around him. This reputation precedes him, with rumors of him being a violent, disturbed juvenile, which isn't the whole story. He's ostracized and his reputation has been destroyed, cast out for a crime he didn't commit. The theme of reputation is also present in the story of Captain William Kidd. Concrete information on Kidd is difficult to come by, as his legend has been propagated among pirates and storytellers alike since his death, many of which embellishing him as a significantly more unabashed pirate than he may have been. What is generally agreed upon between accounts is that Kidd was well liked among governors, if not a bit juvenile. Kidd lived as a privateer, or state-sponsored pirate operating in Atlantic-adjacent waters, and was making a good living. Kidd found that his career would change significantly after being pressured into arresting various high-profile pirates by the English Navy. After not signaling the proper salute to a Royal Navy officer, his ship was branded as criminal within the provinces the Royal Navy had control over, forcing him and his crew into a difficult situation. Kidd and his crew had their backs against the wall, with damage to the ship, disease among the crew, mutiny in the air, and none of the pirates he was sent to arrest apprehended. Kidd was forced to steal a French ship and scuttle his previous ship, the Blessed William. This, while it was a French ship, does count as piracy, and due to his shaky reputation with the Royal Navy, he was branded a pirate regardless. Upon his arrest, it's speculated that Kidd's crew was coerced into testifying against him, claiming he conspired and became comrades with the famous pirates he was supposed to be apprehending. These potentially falsified claims created the grand myth surrounding Kidd, his buried treasure, his proficiency as a high-class pirate, and his current portrayal as a definitive, bona fide, parrot-on-the-shoulder pirate. The image evoked by the myth of Captain Kidd is well represented in Persona 5, as the design of Captain Kidd in-game sports a peg leg and an eye patch, neither of which Captain Kidd actually possessed. William Kidd was tried in England and hung as a threatening example. He died affirming that he was innocent and that he was a victim of political corruption. This idea of an inaccurate reputation appears in the story of Kidd as well as the story of Ryuji Sakamoto. The main thematic difference between the two, however, is Ryuji's ownership of the role forced upon him. During Ryuji's persona awakening, the dialogue reads, "Since your name has been disgraced already, why not hoist the flag and wreak havoc? The other you who exists within desires it thus. I am thou, thou art I. There is no turning back. The skull of rebellion is your flag henceforth." Upon Ryuji's awakening, he abandons the troubles he has with his reputation and decides to live free as himself, only for him and for those he holds dear. Ryuji accepts and uses the punk image he's acquired because he cannot change the past, he can only look forward to the future. Satan Taisei is Ryuji's awakened persona, reflecting himself following the events of his confidant, and also serves to balance Captain Kidd's immediately story-relevant characterization with much more general information about who Ryuji is on the day-to-day. Where Captain Kidd shows Ryuji struggling, Satan Taisei shows Ryuji thriving. Satan Taisei is the Japanese translation of the name Seitieng Da Shung, a name Sun Wukong bestowed upon himself, meaning equaling heaven great sage, while attempting to earn the respect of the Jade Emperor and other heavenly rulers through the means of force. This etymology and where the name originates are immediately reflective of Ryuji's methods of dealing with issues. Ryuji prefers, almost as a rule, to face issues with brute force, whether that be through the means of hitting it till it dies, or bluntly telling friends or comrades when they're acting out of line. Ryuji is not one to utilize a significant amount of nuance. Wukong is a character who can be described as having absolutely no chill. If he is challenged, he fights. If he is disrespected, he retaliates. If he is given a task he deems worthy of himself, he will complete it without fail. Wukong went and got himself immortality using the aptly named Peaches of Immortality, and personally saw to it that his name could never be written in the Book of Life and Death, thus giving him double immortality. Wukong has no concept of doing something subtly, a trait aptly mirrored in Ryuji, both in combat and in dialogue. When analyzing the exposition in Journey to the West, Wukong's source material, Wukong can be described as ascending from ignorance to enlightenment, which leads him to be the bodyguard of Tripitaka, the actual main character of the story. This can be reflected in Ryuji's confidant events as well as his development throughout the narrative. Ryuji at the opening of the game is listless, generally wasting his time and not being particularly invested in anything or anyone, bitter about the events that transpired to dissolve the track team and his friendships with them. Once Ryuji involves himself with the Phantom Thieves and hears the protagonist's plight, Ryuji finds new friends to keep himself on the straight and narrow and gives him something to direct his efforts toward. For example, through this self-reflection, Ryuji ultimately comes to terms with the fact that phantom thievery should be a selfless act, as well as apologizing to Morgana for not clearly expressing that he values him as a teammate. This enlightenment Ryuji undertakes is similar to that of Wukong, who ultimately became more responsible and cooperative with the powers of the heavens after seeing the errors of his brashness. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Antakamaki is a polarizing character in the Persona community. Incidentally, she is the original reason why I set out to write this video. Her persona, Carmen, I feel is extremely closely aligned with her character, and specifically how she feels about a particular aspect of her character. The specific aspect of her character that I feel Carmen sheds light on is her opinion on her sexualization. Carmen originates from the novella and opera of the same name, written and adapted into an opera in the 19th century. Carmen is an early example of a femme fatale, or a female character who generally causes misfortune to the men who interact with her. Carmen is a woman of Romani descent who in her source material is romantically connected with 3 different men throughout the story. She is aligned with a group of bandits and she regularly uses her beauty and fetishization to her advantage, rewarding men who assist her and her band with sexual favors. Fetishization of Carmen is a primary focus of the novel, including an anthropological account of the Romani culture that Carmen originates from. Antakamaki is the first female party member to join the Phantom Thieves, and is generally considered to be the beauty or actress of the group. During the establishing events of Kamoshida's palace, she is a victim. An is placed between humoring Kamoshida and allowing her best friend Shiho Suzui to remain on the volleyball team, or standing up for herself and jeopardizing her friend's happiness. Upon being pushed to the point where she would be performing sexual favors for Kamoshida to keep Suzui on the volleyball team, she refuses his advances altogether, hoping he wouldn't revoke her position on the team. Kamoshida, now unable to get his way with An, calls Suzui to his office and violates her, resulting in Suzui's suicide attempt. An, at this point, has nothing to lose by getting her revenge for Suzui and seeks to join Joker, Ryuji, and Morgana in their efforts against Kamoshida. When An awakens to her persona, it is an act of self-defense, as she was about to be violated by Shadow Kamoshida, removing her of her bodily agency. This moment is reflective of the point in Carmen before Carmen dies, in which she claims to the man she formerly loved that, quote, Carmen will always be free. Even in death, Carmen refused to treat her sexuality as anything but her own, a trait that carries over to An and her role among the thieves as the group's beauty. An regularly lies, using her looks to gain an advantage both in the real world and the metaverse, whether that be a diversion or to gain information or approval. An's nature regarding her sexuality may be reflected when she says, I think having a strong heart means you don't let anything get under your skin. This quote boils An down very effectively, as it both comes into play during her confidant as well as her journey to not allow the gaze of people who don't care about her get to her. Not letting them under her skin is how she has learned to respond to it. She can't help who is attracted to her, but she can defend herself from any unwanted advances. When she wants to advance, it will be on her terms and her terms only. This is also reflected in Carmen's character design. Carmen is dominating two men with heads shaped like hearts to further signify their infatuation with Carmen. This role that the persona plays in her relationship with these two men demonstrates to someone at a glance that Carmen, and An by extension, is in full control of her relationships, or at least the ones that she allows getting close to her. The xenophobia present in the characterization of Carmen also transfers to An. An is implied to be Finnish due to her name Takamaki also being a Finnish surname. Due to this, she is exotic. An, in the eyes of her peers, and unfortunately some of the adults she shouldn't have to defend herself from, fetishize and believe her to be less due to her not being native to Japan. This commentary on both Japanese culture treating the outside as something to be consumed, as well as the worldwide phenomenon of racial fetishization, is wrapped tightly with An's conflict surrounding her character. As stated before, she refuses to let it get to her because if she does, they win. I believe that Carmen is one of the most deliberate selections of character for a persona in the Phantom Thieves, as nearly every aspect of her conflict is represented in her persona. Carmen is such a pivotal part of her character, I feel that she regularly gets misunderstood regarding the severity of exactly what An needs to strengthen her heart against. An's ultimate persona takes a very different approach than Ryuji's. Where Ryuji's reflects another side of himself, An's represents her growth into the type of person she wanted to be. An's ultimate persona is Hecate, and I'll be pronouncing it Hecate for this video because that's what An says in-game. Hecate originates from Greek mythology, and she is the goddess of witchcraft, ghosts, and magic. She's an incredibly difficult goddess to pin down, as her origins are hotly debated, with her parents ranging anywhere from Zeus and Demeter to being a daughter of Leto. The primary information that can be gleaned about Hecate, however, is that she attended Persephone's journey into Hades, holding 2 torches along the way, and that she has 2 dogs that she is commonly seen with. She also appears in Shakespeare's Macbeth as the head of the witches, which solidifies that Hecate can generally be seen as a witch goddess at a glance, a sentiment echoed in her appearance in Persona 5. The lover's confidant is about An wanting to strengthen herself and become someone who she be proud to be, not bending or relenting to anyone who she feels doesn't deserve it. An's strength of character and confidence in herself, as well as what she does and has to do for herself, lie at the center of her character development, which is where we begin to draw our connection to Hecate. The skills and nature that An exhibits throughout the events of the story and her confidant reflects a uniquely feminine portrait of strength. She uses vanity for her gain, both in modeling and in negotiating. She is confident in herself and has a good head on her shoulders, at least not academically. These traits could be considered witch-like in very archaic and misogynistic metrics, where women having an opinion would have them burnt at the stake for fear of them turning out to be a witch. Even An's career choice, modeling, would have been considered something witch-like, as cosmetic enhancement of any kind was banned and a highly suspect activity in early American puritanical circles, such as the infamous Salem, Massachusetts. Hecate, a defining image of a witch, becomes something of an aspirational figure for An to become, a strong and independent woman who will be who she is unapologetically. When An awakens to Hecate, she becomes the witch that she set out to be. She has now fulfilled the goals that she set for herself, both in modeling and in relationships, strengthening her heart in the process. Real talk here. No lies, no funny business. Morgana gets a bad rep in my opinion. His character is often viewed as a guide and much less of an actual, character. Albeit Morgana does take the role of the protagonist's guide in all media that the both of them are present in. However, that isn't to say that Morgana lacks conflict. At innumerable points in the events of Persona 5, Morgana laments his frustrations relating to how he actually totally isn't a cat, and he's a totally super cool human. He swears! Morgana has to constantly reassure himself and others of who he really is, as frankly, Morgana just genuinely doesn't know. As the game progresses, Morgana's comfort with the lack of information that's been found in their efforts dwindles, and he has a full crisis, believing that his comrades view him as useless now that Futaba has joined the Phantom Thieves, taking on his previous role of navigator. Morgana feels he doesn't belong anywhere but the Phantom Thieves, and he has a very hard time describing what he wants and how others make him feel. Therefore, it's easy for those who know him to take his motives at face value, ignorant to the plight that Morgana is just plainly not telling them about. Before his breakdown, Morgana regularly talks himself up as a smooth-talking, heroic, cunning, and skilled gentleman thief, as that is the role model he wants to be. Zoro, a character first created in 1919 by American author Johnston McCulley, is another definitive example of a gentleman thief. He is versed in many fields of study. He is polite, smooth, prepared for any situation, and above all else, someone who breaks the law to better the society they live in. Zoro has appeared in countless pieces of fiction, including dozens of novels by Macaulay ever since his conception, and can be traced as an inspiration of many of the modern superheroes we know today, such as Batman and Spider-Man specifically. Morgana adapts this preconception of Zoro and what he represents into his persona, albeit involuntarily. Morgana, due to thoroughly believing for much of the game that he is in fact this larger-than-life character who is just that cool, takes Zoro as his persona, the manifestation of who he is. Evidence to this can be found in the fact that we never see an actual awakening for Morgana outside of his rank 10 confidant one. Morgana is already set enough in himself that he has nothing to awaken to, as he'd already confirmed to himself while investigating palaces that he was this brilliant gentleman thief of great renown, in place of any real personality he may think he has. Zoro's involvement as a persona is significantly less about being analogous with Morgana's story, but more of what Zoro represents to Morgana, and to help highlight in no uncertain terms exactly what facade Morgana uses to reassure himself of who he is. Mercurius' relation to Morgana is somewhat similar to Zoro, in that it much less involves what is implied by the character that is the persona, but is instead more about how self-image plays into the creation of a persona, albeit Mercurius aligns much more closely than Zoro does. Mercurius is the Romanized form of the Greek god Hermes, and is generally the god of commerce, thieves, luck, travel, and he also helps to guide souls to the underworld. Additionally, Mercurius is often equated with the Philosopher's Stone, the heralded and most powerful relic of alchemy. He is most commonly associated with guidance and messages, however, as Hermes' primary task among the Olympians was that of a mailman. Morgana awakens to Mercurius upon reaching rank 10 in the Magician Confidant, which is involuntary in Persona 5. He awakens to Mercurius upon opening up to Joker the night before the heist on Mementos about the value that the Phantom Thieves have had for him, and how he admires Joker and finds him to be in a uniquely unfair situation. Morgana now awakens to Mercurius, whose relevance as a famous guide reveals itself in the next day, during the heist. Morgana, as they descend to the depths of Mementos, realizes more and more that he was born in the quarantine cell, later confirmed to be the Velvet Room, to guide Joker to stave off the impending ruin that Yaldabaoth would surely bring. This realization of the truth of what and who Morgana is recontextualizes his self-worth, shifting his perception of himself from being that of a go-it-alone gentleman thief to a guide for others through the trials that they may face, a role that Morgana has inadvertently played the entire game, both in and out of the metaverse. What I'm saying is, yes, Morgana telling you to go to sleep is pivotal to his character development. Due to the nature of Morgana's confidant being involuntary, both of his personas are critical to understanding how Morgana grew through the events of Persona 5. Morgana began as a character deluded by his grandeur, and would only awaken to who he truly is upon both fulfilling his duty to escort the Phantom Thieves to the center of Mementos, but also realizing why he was doing such a thing. This purpose of Morgana is present in the entire game. He tells you to go to bed, believing it to be the best course of action for you. He helps you on tests. He helps in the efforts to change hearts. Morgana is there as your guide, not just Joker's guide, we the player's guide through the entire journey of Persona 5. Zoro and Mercurius are both representatives of the two different sections of Morgana's life. There's what he was born to do, represented by Mercurius, and what he lives to do, represented by Zoro. Yusuke Kitagawa's persona is Goemon, a renowned thief from Japanese legend, viewed by the West as the Japanese Robin Hood. Yusuke's character and his routine struggles with art, life, and the balance that must exist between them, as well as the staples of his character design, serve to inform Yusuke's ownership of Goemon as a persona. Ishikawa Goemon lived in late 16th century Japan, and following his mother and village being decimated by soldiers of the local shogunate, he swore to bring the institution to its knees in an act of revenge and to ensure that never again will an innocent person be forced to watch their family and livelihood perish before them. Goemon would train as a ninja for many years before reapplying his skills to the destruction of the systems responsible for his mother's demise. During this period, Goemon would steal precious items and supplies from the rich and give them to peasants, especially those who have been affected by the military's deeds. He created immense chaos across Japan, and upon Goemon's identity becoming public, his wife and infant son would be kidnapped and threatened to be killed if he didn't turn himself in. Unwilling to take this lying down, Goemon devised a plan to kidnap a high-ranking official named Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who was staying in the same stronghold as his family was being held. Goemon intended to trade him for his wife and child, hoping to avoid further death. Upon knocking over a bell in the stronghold, the official and his guards captured him and his wife was revealed to already be dead. Goemon would be sentenced to death, boiled alive with his son, as punishment for his crimes. Unwilling to watch more of his family die, Goemon was scalded and boiled to death, holding his son high in the air, claiming that never again as long as I live shall I watch my family die. Yusuke's character revolves around his relationship to his passion and profession, art. Under Madarame's tutelage, his art was stolen, he was neglected, and the people whom he lived with often died, left, or were punished by Madarame. Yusuke lived this way because his mother died when he was 3, an incident which was believed to be an accident. However, Madarame witnessed Yusuke's mother suffering a seizure and neglected to help her, as a means by which to pilfer her art. Following her death, he bastardized her creation and led Yusuke to believe that Madarame was doing him a service by allowing him to stay under such conditions. Following an incidental trip to the metaverse with the Phantom Thieves, Yusuke saw Madarame for who he is and awoke to Goemon, realizing that his feelings of dissatisfaction with his arrangement were valid and that he has absolutely nothing to thank Madarame for. Goemon's connection to Yusuke is strongest in the themes of justice and family, as both of which relate to the core of both characters. Yusuke's retaliation against Madarame is indicative of his wish to destroy the man who is responsible for the death of those close to him, much like how Madarame's attack on the shogunate was for the same reason. Additionally, Yusuke's involvement with the plot to change Madarame's heart is partially to stop Madarame from further stealing art, both that of his and his peers. This is similar to Goemon upon his death refusing to let his son boil, to keep one last person from being hurt by the shogunate. These reasons, while concrete and true, seem somewhat superficial when you consider this is not remotely a unique story. Plenty of characters do what they do for revenge, and an almost equal number do it because of other people being hurt. So why Goemon specifically? Goemon is a very popular character in Japan, as his values of justice are nearly universal and his tale is interesting. Goemon has been immortalized in countless pieces of art and literature that all serve to inform the modern Japanese identity. Yusuke's design and his interests are all Japanese in origin, with his Phantom Thief outfit reflecting a kitsune, his art form of choice being Japanese painting, and even down to his weapon, commonly Japanese swords such as katanas. Due to Yusuke's deep ties to Japanese tradition, it makes sense to have his persona reflect that. Ishikawa Goemon's tale is most commonly found represented in kabuki theater, as well as the famous prints used to document that theater. Interestingly enough, due to Yusuke's study of Japanese art, he was bound to come across these famous prints, inspiring his image of rebellion manifesting as his persona. This uniquely Japanese identity that Goemon holds in opposition to other characters of similar arcs helps to further characterize Yusuke and provide him with a unique identity to all of the other Phantom Thieves. Kamu Susano is Yusuke's persona following the completion of the Emperor Confidant and is based on the kami of the same name. I'd like to quickly take a second to make a distinction between the term kami and the term god. Kami is something of a catch-all term in Shinto myth that encompasses almost all spirits, actual gods, or otherwise interesting items. It's been considered to mean god, but it isn't an entirely perfect translation. However, that isn't very relevant to this persona, as Kamu Susano is based on the kami of the seas, Susano, who is a god. Quickly, again, before we continue, Kamu is a similar term to Kami, with the difference being the age in which the term was used, with Kamu being a form used in Old Japanese. Susano is a son of Izanagi and Izanami, and rules over the seas, while his sister Amaterasu and brother Tsukiyomi rule the sun and heavens and moon respectively. Susano's most common story involves him being banished from the heavens by his father following the death of Izanami, his mother. after which he visits Amaterasu and enrages her after he kills a seamstress of hers, then descends to the mortal world where he marries a woman he saves from the 8-headed Yamato no Rorochi, then rips a sword out of its tail, then gives that sword to Amaterasu as a peace offering, thus regaining his ability to enter the heavens. Susano is also known to be an impulsive and ruthless kami, frequently lashing out in anger, which is said to be the cause of all storms in Japan. He is also a renowned swordsman and said to be the most powerful swordsman among the kami, feared and revered by all but the strongest kami. Susano's rampages and destruction are said to be the result of the loss of his mother, whom he loved dearly, similarly to how Yusuke lost his mother. Susano's sorrow over the loss of his mother is mirrored in Yusuke during Yusuke's struggle to relieve himself of the slump he finds himself in during the events of the Emperor Confidant. The slump in question was likely brought on by an inability to properly process the change and grief he's undergone since the events of Madarame's palace. Learning your mother was killed by the man you admire is deeply troubling, and it can be reasonably assumed that his incessant surge to understand and express human desire in his art is likely an effort to learn to mourn and validate himself as someone with worth. He is distraught by the truth of her death and nearly lashes out in anger upon being judged poorly for his creations, much like Susano regularly lashes out because he has little way of an outlet following the loss of his mother. Additional information which may relate the two can be posited in that some interpretations of Susano show him with a softer side, reading poems and generally calming down and appreciating art for the beauty it holds. Considering Yusuke has to completely reconsider how he views art during the events of his confidant, this comparison holds water. Susano also helps to solidify the connection between Yusuke and traditional Japan, as Susano is one of the most powerful and treasured kami in Shinto myth, so Yusuke in his pursuit of Japanese art has likely seen Susano regularly, much like he did with Ishikawa Goemon. A final, admittedly loose, but it's entertaining, connecting thread between the two is Yusuke's apparent ability to bring storms with him wherever he goes, as evidenced numerous times when the events planned by the Phantom Thieves get rained out, as well as the accidental cancelling of Kosei High's trip to LA due to weather. Naturally, this is interesting because Susano is a deity who rules over storms. It may just be a gag, but it's an amusing connection nonetheless. Makoto is a fan-favorite character amidst the Persona community, and seemingly the most common romance option for many players. She's kind, strong, spirited, and she gets quite a lot of screen time, so it isn't hard to see why. Makoto Nijima's character revolves around her relationship with corruption, and her unique form of rebellion is civil disobedience from a position of power, refusing to bow to the will of those who would have her use her hard-earned talents for unsavory or blatantly self-serving purposes. Makoto's arc begins in May, when the principal Kobayakawa asks that she look into suspicious characters around the school, as he believes that the Phantom Thieves, who've just recently appeared, are students at Shujin Academy. Makoto, needing a recommendation letter, obliges and begins to tail the thieves. Makoto at this point in the game comes off as a total pushover, bending to the will of any authority, and everyone at Shujin knows it, as they are aware that Makoto did nothing when she knew of Kamoshida's abuse of students. Makoto is troubled by the reputation she has accrued, as she has done nothing but try to please people ever since her father died, if for nothing else than to not be a burden on her sister. Even regarding the case of Kamoshida, her hands were tied in the whole situation, rendering the power she'd worked so hard for completely useless against powers that she would have to use it against. In June, upon tailing the Phantom Thieves to their hideout, and after botching an operation to work with the thieves, they end up in debt to the local crime lord Junya Kaneshiro. Upon entering the metaverse and being cornered within Kaneshiro's flying bank, Makoto awakens to her persona, Johanna. Johanna is based on Pope Joan, a fictional character popularized in the 13th century to decry the Catholic Church. Pope Joan was a woman who, after traveling with her lover, became incredibly scholarly and was unanimously appointed to popehood, although she was a sinner and a woman, both of which were traits viewed as unfavorable by the Catholic Church at the time. Pope Joan would operate as pope for a few years before giving birth during a church procession, exposing her identity and ultimately resulting in her stoning by the Romans of the city. Considering the stories of Johanna and Makoto side by side, the connections become apparent. Makoto is a woman who has worked for her position and finds herself unfairly oppressed by the bigger fish who would have her do their bidding. Due to factors out of her control, the people who she is supposed to be helping and leading despise her, much like Joan's followers would ultimately kill her. Makoto's inability to be burdensome and the constraints that have been placed on her have created a desire to break free from the expectations of others and use the impressive acumen she's built for herself and for justice. Upon realizing this within Kanashiro's palace and refusing to take yet another adult's desires for her lying down, Johanna, the symbol of a woman at the very top, remaining oppressed by the patriarchy as a whole, appears to her in the form of a motorcycle, offering an escape from that which would tie her down. Johanna is a persona who is much less based on exact moments in her story that translate to her wielder's character arc, but instead is her persona because Makoto faces the same systematic barriers that her persona does. Makoto's goal-oriented mindset is reflected in the relationship between herself and her persona, as well as her persona's design, as the motorcycle design of Johanna represents Makoto's efficient methodology in tasks, studying, and thief work, meaning that her iron will would be the fastest way to any given destination. Anat is a war goddess worshipped in Ugaritic myth, which is a mythos that has been preserved from Ugari, a dialect of the Amorite language, a long-extinct language which helped to clarify information relating to ancient Israelites and Hebrews, and specifically the methods by which they communicated. Anat is the sister of Baal, and is something of a heroic character, despite her sadistic tendencies in combat. Accounts of Anat vary when Western preconceptions of gender are unchecked upon reading into the Ugaritic mythos. Anat is in some cases perceived as a fertility goddess, as are most other goddesses when viewed in the light of Western archaeology. However, less information exists to support this claim. Anat, when viewed from the Ugaritic lens, likely just represented a woman who happened to be an incredibly powerful warrior. Some who support that Anat is a fertility goddess would view her close relationship with her brother Baal as sexual or marital. However, it's more likely that they were just very close in the way that siblings are, not lovers. Unfortunately, however, it appears that the interpretation that is present within Persona 5 is the one believing that she is a fertility goddess, as that appears to be the prevailing information about the goddess. Despite this interpretation being somewhat tainted in some senses by the Western lens of archaeology, the relevance and connection between Makoto and Anat prevail. Makoto is regularly considered to be the mom friend of the group, ensuring everyone does their homework, makes sure everyone is in good health, keeps everyone to certain standards of morality. It's no surprise that her role as this figure would reflect in her ultimate persona, Anat. Due to Anat's perceived status as a fertility goddess, those traits of motherhood present in Anat's character translate to Makoto in the form of this gentle assurance that her friends are doing well. It's also important, however, to recall that Anat is a fearsome warrior, with myriad points of extreme violence on massive and small scales, a trait shown in Makoto's combat prowess and her ability to threaten and scare shadows and enemies all alike. Makoto's dual nature as both nurturing and vicious presents itself within the priestess confidant as well, as the confidant sees Makoto learn how to make and care for friends as well as punish those who would go out of their way to harm her friends, as seen in the host club boyfriend points within the confidant. Anat is, in my opinion, a phenomenal persona for Makoto, representing both sides of Makoto's struggles and personality, and her relevance as her ultimate persona implies that Makoto could only tap into both of these aspects of herself simultaneously after the events of the priestess confidant, showing significant growth and strength of character. The fourth heist in Persona 5 takes the Phantom Thieves to the palace of none other than Futaba Sakura, the seventh member of the Phantom Thieves. This palace is based on a pyramid, and all of the tropes that may come with stealing something from such a tomb. Futaba has, in my opinion, the most unique palace in Persona 5, perhaps bar the laboratory in Persona 5 Royal. What makes Futaba's palace so interesting is that her distorted desires responsible for the manifestation of her palace are not related to her wanting to grow an exorbitant amount of money or sexually abuse her subservience. Futaba wants to die. Futaba's mother died a year before the events of Persona 5, and due to a falsified suicide note, Futaba believes that it is her fault, when in truth her mother suffered a mental shutdown to keep her research from reaching the public. The effect that this knowledge had on Futaba created a very severe set of cases of agoraphobia, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and suicidal tendencies. Futaba refuses to leave her room, both out of fear of other people and because she believes that her room is the only place where she cannot affect anyone else. Her tomb, where she would lay until she wastes away. Upon entering the metaverse while the Phantom Thieves are attempting to steal her treasure, Futaba comes into contact with the very object of her guilt, a sphinx in the image of Wakaba Ishiki herself. This shadow serves to subdue Futaba's shadow, a manifestation of Futaba's base instincts to live. Since Futaba's shadow is also representative of the logical part of Futaba's mind trying to sort through what actually happened, and the fact that Futaba isn't responsible, it can be assumed that the shadow Wakaba is representative of Futaba's mental illnesses and intrusive thoughts, clouding her judgment and not allowing her to remember the events of her mother's death correctly. But really quickly, just so we're square, H.P. Lovecraft is a terrible, horrible person, but he is responsible for countless sci-fi and horror tropes today. He is a horrible person. Look up the name of his cat if you don't believe me, but just making it clear that I share none of his views. The Necronomicon is a grimoire within the fiction and myths surrounding the work of H.P. Lovecraft, an author who was a pioneer in the horror genre. Lovecraft would author dozens of works, many of which revolve around the fear of the unknown and various massive cosmic gods who view humanity as completely inconsequential, like ants. The Necronomicon was reportedly written by a man referred to as Abdul Hazred, or the Mad Arab. Lovecraft, everyone, who worships some of these various gods, and it's believed that the book holds secrets relating to how to summon deities and other rituals that are detrimental to yourself and others. Due to the supposed content of the book, the knowledge within is considered forbidden. The nature of the Necronomicon as a suppository of forbidden information connects well to Futaba's arc within her palace. When she becomes privy to the knowledge that her mother did love her and that she had no hand in her death, she is empowered by this forbidden information. Necronomicon to Futaba is the ability to look through the veil and find the truth, which is important because her life has been irreparably ruined by misinformation. Necronomicon is also unique as a persona, since it isn't a character but an object, although some accounts posit that the book may be alive, but that's neither here nor there. The relevance of an object being Futaba's persona as opposed to a character or deity, like many others, is related to her antisocial tendencies. Since she's found it hard to connect to other people, she can't project another person onto herself and instead an object. This signifies that while Futaba has come extremely far, she still has quite a way to go before she can begin to understand other people and socialize again. Futaba's confidant events are all relating to building a new future for Futaba, and helping her to cope with the more specifically unsavory aspects of her past while helping her become acclimated to the world that she now has to live in. On this path, Futaba recalls her only friend in school, a girl named Kana, who Futaba learned was being sexually abused by her parents. After Futaba learned this, however, Kana stopped talking to her, and she would be left alone with the knowledge of what was happening, but with no way to act. After time passes, Futaba recognizes that she can now reach out to Kana again, to apologize for not doing anything and to clear her conscience of the guilt she feels. Kana responds to Futaba, and apparently the abuse had not since stopped, it had instead escalated. Futaba asks the Phantom Thieves help her to change Kana's parents' hearts, which the Phantom Thieves agree is a just use of their resources. Kana's abuse finally ceases and Kana and Futaba both become friends again, talking to one another and catching up after much too long has passed. Upon maxing out the Hermit Confidant, Futaba awakens to Prometheus, who was based on the Titan of the same name in Greek myth, who provided humanity with the gift of fire after stealing it from Mount Olympus. For this action, 2 punishments would be enacted. As payment for the fire given to them, Zeus would unleash Pandora and her box upon humanity, who would allow humanity to suffer disease, war, and all other forms of suffering. Additionally, Prometheus himself would be chained to a rock and his liver eaten by a crow once a day if left undisturbed. Both Prometheus and the Hermit Confidant have themes relating to the price of knowledge. Following Futaba's realization that Kana's parents were abusing her, she sadly lost the one friend that she had, much like how humanity was plagued by the suffering that Pandora brought as payment for the ability to cook, create, and warm themselves. Furthermore, Prometheus's action-first story in terms of how the Titan provided knowledge to humanity can be seen in parallel to the role that Futaba plays within the Phantom Thieves. Her actions with her persona allow the thieves to explore further, and the knowledge that she provides them becomes very much a means to an end. In a sense, fire can be equated to the metaverse analysis that Futaba provides. Both fire and Futaba's assistance will prove to drastically change the course of humanity's and the Phantom Thieves' actions respectively. I'm not even gonna try to cover it up. Haru is my absolute favorite character in Persona 5, bar none. And I find that the details of her design, as well as the information both immediately presented and implied in her mandatory story events, go criminally overlooked. Haru's character was, in my opinion, handled poorly in the context of the events of Okumura's palace. However, that's mostly due to having too many plot threads that aren't always clear in whether or not they're meant to conclude within the events of the heist. When Haru's story is isolated as best it can be and examined, a profound, strong character arc can be found. I apologize for the long recap I'm about to do, but I feel that the events of Okumura's palace get jumbled, so it'll just be a quick refresher on the information that we should know regarding. To summarize, Haru's story revolves around the constant parental abuse that she's felt for her entire life, as she's been forced into a corner by her father, Kunikazu Okumura. Haru has been an accessory to Okumura, incapable of having her own feelings, her own opinions, or her own will on any subject that her father holds dominion over. This control over Haru comes to a crossroads upon Haru's father informing her that she will be marrying the son of a powerful powerful politician, a marriage arranged without care for Haru's opinion or her well-being, as the man she is to be married to could be a palace ruler in his own right, considering how disgusting his demeanor not only towards Haru but towards women in general is. Following this breaking point, Haru begins to look for methods by which to rebel against her father, which leads her to Morgana one night she decides to stay out late. Morgana is currently separated from the Phantom Thieves and acting alone. Morgana finds Okumura's palace and decides he could change Okumura's heart by himself, a task simply too large for him to feasibly complete. Haru follows Morgana, accidentally entering her own father's palace, finding her method of rebellion in the process. It is after this point that Haru awakens to her persona, Milady. However, the awakening does not completely work, with her only awakening to her Phantom Thief attire and the concept of her persona. Her rebellion remains unfocused, loose, so she can't unlock the most important aspects of herself which would allow her to wield her persona. However, it's important that Haru awakens partially, as it's difficult to completely tear down the wall of what you've been groomed into for your entire life, and the partial awakening can be seen as representative of Haru beginning to tear down the nonsensical traditions she's been continuously forced into. Due to this, Morgana and the newly adorned beauty thief wander mementos, completing Phantom Thief requests likely in a bid to get back at the core group. Upon confrontation within Okumura's palace, Haru finally awakens fully to Milady, just saving herself from violation by the cognitive stand-in for her fiancé. It is at this point, supported by Morgana and the Phantom Thieves, that she awakens fully to Milady and betrays the vision that her father holds for her. Haru's persona, Milady, is based on Milady de Winter from the novel The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. Milady is generally a villain within the novel. She is a thief, a spy, a seductress, and she is unknowably cunning. However, this information is generally hidden to most, as to the outside world, she simply is the beautiful Milady de Winter, who has had a few husbands here and there. De Winter is a classic example of a femme fatale, utilizing the patriarchal view of beautiful women such as herself to further her devious agenda, and eluding capture all the while. This strength, as well as her hidden nature, are represented in the persona Milady, as represented by the copious weapons hidden beneath her dress, appearing mostly harmless but revealing herself to be deadly. Haru Okumura embodies Milady de Winter through their mutual secret lives. Haru's twin lives exist in the form of her perceived obedience to her father, living with him and gathering inside information from both Okumura and the police that she will put to use when she is operating as Noir, the Phantom Thief. This idea of contrast is further supported by the items that Haru views to be rebellious, her weapons as well as her clothing. Haru wields a massive axe and a grenade launcher, two weapons that are huge, imprecise, unwieldy, and difficult to control. All of these traits are reflective of what Haru sees rebellion as, rejecting the perfect precision life she's had to walk on eggshells for her entire life, and instead becoming bold, crude even. Furthermore, Haru's Phantom Thief attire resembles that of French 17th century masculine dress, reflecting that Haru is not taking on the role of a damsel in distress, but instead the hero who aims to save the damsel, further rejecting the norms forced on her by her sheltered and destructive home life. Additionally, Haru's obvious ties to nobility, as the heiress of a large conglomerate, easily ties into the unique noble connections that we see in the character of Milady de Winter. It's easily the strongest through line between the characters, and it serves to illustrate how a character who recognizes their position adjacent to corruption can assist the destruction of such a position, making the world a better place for the greater sum of the people. The irony is not lost on me that a character so often misconstrued by the fanbase revolves around outward appearances, but I can see why she can be easily misread, considering the wildly out-of-place arcs occurring during the fifth heist of the game, as well as some questionable dialogue writing during that arc that failed to give it the weight it needed. In conclusion, Milady does not provide the nail in the coffin for Haru's rebellion, but instead informs her idea of it, and provides a template by which her Phantom Thief work will be carried out. Haru's social link is that of the Empress Arcana, in which Haru expresses that following her father's untimely demise, she now holds the stock in Okumura Foods that her father once did, and she suspects that some characters within the company are conspiring to threaten her into selling her stocks and leaving the company as a whole, which would nip her issues in the bud, but would also throw Okumura Foods employees under the bus, which after seeing their mistreatment at the hands of her father, she does not feel comfortable doing. The stress of the expectations laid on her require that she reach out for help, leading to the events of the Empress Confidant, where Joker comforts and helps Haru to make a decision that would be true to herself, while nurturing Haru's interests and making sure she takes time for herself. Haru's ultimate persona is Ashtarti, who is a goddess of many faces and even more names. She appears in Ugarit myth as Anat's friend, an additional consort of Baal, an Abrahamic myth which she was a symbol decrying the old gods in favor of the one true god. She may have been understood by the people of Mesopotamia as Ishtar. She can be conflated as Sekhmet in Egyptian myth, and she also appears in the myths of the Phoenicians and Canaanites as a goddess of nature and agriculture. Underlying information between many interpretations connect Ashtarti to nature and fertility in some cases. Ashtarti is often a goddess of great renown, being heavily revered and even the head goddess in some denominations. Ashtarti's primary focus on agriculture can be seen in Haru's interests, specifically those relating to Haru's interest in food and sustainable agriculture in a restaurant setting. Haru's confidant bonuses provide you the ability to instruct Haru to grow specific vegetables in her garden, providing the team with healing and buffing items for their journey. Haru's persona being Ashtarti would suggest that agriculture is an integral enough part of Haru's identity that she would identify an agriculture goddess as a reflection of herself, providing our first and most obvious immediate connection between the two. Ashtarti's undeniable power and influence in the many mythological spheres across the world can be seen reflected in Haru's primary ownership of Okumura Foods, one of the largest and most profitable fast food chains in the world, and she will do exactly as she pleases with it, planning to open a chain of eco-friendly coffee shops one day as well as improving the policies in place within the Big Bang Burger chain of restaurants. Haru's connection with nature and gardening mirrors Ashtarti, who to Haru represents standing up for herself and doing exactly what she wants. Due to Haru taking her position in stride, meaning that Haru can now operate within her company as she pleases, she takes care of herself, her friends, and her hobbies before anything relating to her father's influence. Ashtarti serves as an image of aspiration for Haru after moving on from her father's death and using the power she's been given to improve in a way that only she could. From this point forward, I'll be explicitly referring to events exclusive to Persona 5 Royal. If you haven't played P5R yet, or otherwise experienced the content unfolding from January 1st forward, I'd advise that you experience it in some way that isn't me providing fragments of story events. Thank you very much. Let's continue. Goro Akechi is one of two potential wildcard wielders within Persona 5, the other being Joker. Akechi wields two personas seemingly at will, claiming in Memento's dialogue that he can simply choose which to use, implying that both of his personas are equally part of him and neither can be separated, lest he be incomplete. Akechi wields the personas Robin Hood and Loki, two opposites within one wielder. Robin Hood is a fictional character popularized in 1500s theater and exists in most every medium of art, from theater to video games. Robin Hood is an archetypal character, a trickster hero who steals from those who would do wrong and help the needy. He and his merry band of thieves live in the Sherwood Forest happily, going about their lives and running from the law. Some sources debate his actual origins, however, the most common iteration in public perception is that of the archer clad in Lincoln green. The Robin Hood persona notably takes inspiration from not only Robin Hood, but also Superman, the classic comic book hero. These design origins help to invoke an image of pure, unbridled heroism, as Superman and Robin Hood are both heroes who go morally uncontested by the majority of the public. This image of filtered heroism helps to illustrate the detective prince image that Akechi has worked so hard to curate. Akechi has become a celebrity. The public will listen to him, his thoughts relating to the Phantom Thieves are televised with press conferences dedicated to asking him his opinion. This celebrity detective image is not a concept original to Akechi, however, as characters such as Sherlock Holmes, Inspector Ganimard, and Kogoro Akechi, the inspiration for Akechi's character, all predate him. Akechi appears to be the classic detective foil to Joker's gentleman thief, fulfilling the trope established by the genre. Akechi is acutely aware of the effect he has on the public, utilizing that image for his own gain on numerous occasions. Robin Hood's reflection of the paragon hero of justice helps to characterize Akechi's detective prince, by reflecting the image he's worked so hard to maintain, reflecting in his very soul. Robin Hood utilizes bless skills, signifying that Akechi's actions are justified in the eyes of himself, or so it would seem. Upon the night of November 20th, the game catches up to the retelling that has been given up to this point, and Akechi attempts to assassinate Joker, ending the Phantom Thieves. and revealing his true nature. A calculated and lucky gamble by the Phantom Thief saves Joker, and the game continues. From this point forward, Akechi's reputation is tarnished in the eyes of the player, and something more sinister must be afoot. Inside Shido's palace, upon encountering Akechi, he sheds his facade and shows Joker exactly who he is and how he feels. Upon this revelation, Akechi calls forward the powers of Loki. Loki is based on the Norse god of the same name, generally considered to be a trickster god who is up to no good. He is regularly in opposition to the Aesir gods of Norse myth, and is blamed for many of the unfortunate goings-on within the myth. However, the Eddas, a set of volumes regarding exactly what may have happened during the events of Norse myth, regularly show the Aesir gods, particularly Odin and Thor, killing innocents, inflating their egos, and generally being a nuisance to everyone but themselves, often asking that Loki solve problems that they have no means by which to do, and consider him a menace on many occasions. Due to this, Loki has gained a reputation similar to that of a satanic figure, with his reputation becoming much more black and white, despite the dubious information relating to the guilt in many of the crimes committed by the Aesir and blamed on Loki. Goro Akechi, during the battle, is revealed to be directly responsible for the deaths of all of the victims of the mental shutdown cases, utilizing his powerful persona to reach the shadows of palace owners and shadows within mementos and killing them. However, Akechi was ordered into such a role by his father, Masayoshi Shido, who presumably doesn't know that Akechi was his real son. Akechi laments that he remains somehow inferior to Joker, and he has no idea how. Akechi details the life he's lived, professing the management of everything about his career, his grades, and his image. He admits that the Detective Prince was all an act, as it was just a facade to be noticed by Shido, so that he might be able to get close to him and ultimately kill him in revenge for the hell that he has put Akechi through. After Akechi is defeated, a shadow form of himself is dispatched by Shido to kill him, presumably because Shido no longer had a use for Akechi. Akechi and Shido's relationship mirrors the relationship of Loki and Odin, and that the powerful and looming man in charge gives his subservient dirty work to do in order to serve his image, then blaming the subservient later on for the actions that the leader forced them to do. Loki and Akechi are both victims in this sense, as they are subjugated by the gain of another, greedier power. Akechi's hatred for his father would not be fulfilled by him, however, and instead would by saving the thieves from the shadow Akechi and potentially sacrificing himself in the process, give his ambition to Joker, trusting him to enact his revenge in his stead. In Royal, it is revealed that Akechi did not die in Shido's palace, and instead escaped and has been laying low since. Upon the events of January 1st, following Joker's realization that reality is fundamentally wrong, Akechi contacts Joker and asks that they meet to discuss what's happening. In the content present in Royal, Akechi has completely cut loose from his squeaky clean image, as he now has no need for it. Those who contest him now know his true nature, making such a display of altruism and kindness meaningless to Akechi. Near the end of the events of Royal, it is revealed that the Akechi that we have been speaking to may be a reanimated Akechi, courtesy of Maruki's rewritten reality, as it is presumed by all, including Maruki, that Akechi died in the palace. This appears disproven later, with Akechi appearing outside the train Joker returns home on. However, Akechi is more than willing to throw down his life for the true and just reality pursued by the Phantom Thieves, a noble sacrifice somewhat unbecoming of him. Akechi would prefer that this reality be demolished because he feels he is being manipulated again. He refuses to let that stand, making his altruistic actions somewhat clouded by personal intent. Hereward the Wake, commonly cited as an inspiration to the story of Robin Hood, is not a pleasant tale. He is exiled from England, acting as a mercenary in Flanders and Ireland for several years, until learning that his family in England has been overthrown, and his family's heads displayed on stakes outside their homes. Unwilling to let this stand, and unwilling to allow the Normans to simply trample on England, he returns home and slaughtered many of them. In a later tale in 1070, Hereward would demonstrate a similar bloodlust when attempting to free England from Norman control, allying with the troops of the Danish king of the time against William the Conqueror. He would prove useful in the conquest and would directly have a hand in the fall of the Isle of Ely, freeing the people there if not for his own intentions of revenge. Upon Akechi awakening to his ultimate persona Hereward, who in most cases would just be considered an extension of Robin Hood, Akechi is neither good nor evil. And Hereward, as a self-motivated character who ends up helping the greater good of the masses, reflects that. Hereward represents Akechi's lack of black and white morality in Royal, as the image of Robin Hood is invoked in Hereward, but the color scheme and abilities of Loki are put into practice, symbolizing a harmony between the two. Kasumi's personas and their relevance to her character are best explained through story. So we'll be traveling through Kasumi's character in chronological order of events, so sit down, grab a drink, and leave right now if you haven't played Royal. Seriously, this time, I mean it. If you haven't played Royal, leave now. Pause the video and leave now. I'll even wait a bit. Okay, all of you better have 120 hours in Royal. Don't say I didn't give you a spoiler alert. Kasumi Yoshizawa's involvement with the Phantom Thieves is spotty, even going so far as to not support their actions at several points, thinking that their actions are too forceful and rob those whose hearts were changed their agency in their development. She thinks that anyone forcing their will on others, regardless of if it's for the good of themselves and others, is ultimately wrong, which really is quite ironic considering that Kasumi is not Kasumi. Sumire Yoshizawa, the younger sister of Kasumi, was dealing with a significant depression roughly a month before the events of Persona 5 begin. Her emotions are suppressed, and she believes that she won't live up to the talent that her sister exhibits. Sumire eventually laments the struggle to Kasumi, after which she runs into traffic, nearly killing her if her sister did not take the lethal blow for her. Following the death of her sister, Sumire's depression deepens, believing that she has no right to be alive as the objectively worse sister. She wishes that Kasumi were still here, her talent not wasted on the likes of Sumire, so that she might still be following the dream that they've both worked so hard for. Dr. Maruki offers Sumire a way out, escaping from the life that she currently leads. Maruki recently awoke to his persona, Azathoth, which allows him to alter the cognition of whoever he chooses. With Azathoth, Maruki wishes to rid the world of suffering, but also rid the world of agency in the process. Sumire unknowingly accepts the offer, and now believes herself to be the real Kasumi, living in her stead. Cinderella follows the story of a girl named Ella, who lives a life of squalor put in place by her stepmother and sisters. One night, she has an opportunity to visit the royal ball, with all the splendor and luxury that entails. However, she is only allowed one night for this revelry, having to leave the ball before midnight lest her disguise be ruined. Following this, the prince from the ball the night before looks to find Ella, with only the glass slipper she's left behind to identify her, ultimately leading to leaving her abusive family at the end of the story. Sumire awakens to Cendrillon, the French term for Cinderella, after stumbling into Maruki's palace and being forced to face a cognitive being of her past self. Depressed and clad in the leotard of her sister, Kasumi seems to recall the past image of herself, forcing her mind into turmoil, leading her to awakening of Cendrillon, a woman masquerading as someone not herself, solidifying Sumire's delusion that she is Kasumi. This delusion only serves as a defense mechanism, something to keep the truth out, a weapon against that which might harm her. Just as Cinderella danced until midnight in her revelry, Sumire deludes herself beyond midnight, and her mental image is beginning to come down. Sumire lashes out at Joker and Akechi, who want to save her from the delusion that she's penned herself into, and in this anger, Cendrillon turns blood red, the final dredges of delusion holding on to Sumire's personality. Following the defeat of Kasumi, you can interact with Sumire in confidant events while she begins to try to piece together her grief, move on from the death of her sister, and regain her sense of self. When Joker helps her independent pursuit of regaining her sense of self and self-image, since her life was effectively wiped away with her delusion of self, Sumire awakens to Vanity, a different name of the Norse god Freya, the goddess of nature, life, gold, and also the younger of two sisters. Sumire's awakening to Vanity is Sumire recognizing not only that she is the younger of two sisters and not an only child, but also that she has worth of her own, not just as a pair. After Prince Charming sees Ella for the person she is and not her illusion of status that she displayed during the ball, he accepts her and marries her, recognizing that Ella doesn't need a facade to impress people. She's fine just the way she is. This is reflected when Sumire awakens to Ella, the fusion of Cendrillon and Vanity. Ella represents Sumire's acceptance of her for no one but herself, not only as a sister, but as a talented individual capable of holding the dream of her and her sister in their own way. Okay, this part is much less scripted, but I can't really let this stand here. Kasumi should not have Cendrillon as a persona. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense in one way, I hope. I hope the way I just said makes sense to you. But the idea that Cinderella represents as a passive character in the events of her story paint Kasumi as a damsel in distress figure to be saved by a Prince Charming, or in this case, Joker. Kasumi is not someone who just follows the flow of events. She seeks closure and escapism, and is a go-getter in every sense of the word. She is actively working to solve her own problems. So part of me would prefer that Vanity be her primary persona as opposed to Cendrillon, as Freya provides unique foreshadowing to Kasumi's story and is not a passive part of her own story. Anyway, you can interpret Kasumi however you want, but outside of contextual analysis, Kasumi's individual personas, Cendrillon and Ella, feel antithetical to the story trying to be told by Royal and Kasumi's arc in general. Again, just my opinion, but a friend of mine, 3Waifu, made a very interesting video about the subject that I recommend you check out. It's a really phenomenal video, and I cannot refer to an SMT YouTuber harder than him. That's everyone. Thank you so much for coming along with me on this journey across the world and through Shibuya. Thank you for watching this long. It's certainly been quite a ride. All things considered, the primary personas of each party member appear to be much more thoughtfully selected than their ultimates, with a number of exceptions, but every main persona definitely lines up extremely well in my opinion. The thoughtfulness of the writing in Persona 5 cannot be understated. Between the narrative parallels of the personas and the storytelling that is only found behind these personas, it helps to show the depth and care that P Studio and Atlus put into the development of these characters to make them as lovable and interesting as possible. But so, yeah, again, thank you for watching this long. It means a lot. I've been trying to get this off the ground for a while, and we're finally at the end. It's a really weird feeling to be at the end of this project. I've been working on this for about 7 months. Pretty on and off, admittedly, but I definitely want to make more content in the future, so hopefully this is a good jumping off point. I don't know how good this video is going to be. I'll admit it might be really bad, and you might be like, wow, this person's a total fucking bozo, holy shit, like why are they uploading content on YouTube? But, you know, everyone's got to start somewhere. So, again, thank you. I imagine I'm saying something of worth if you've watched, like, over an hour of me talking about Persona 5 characters. Again, thank you. I don't feel like I have the stature yet to ask you to like and subscribe. You know, it just doesn't make sense, so do that if you want. But this has been Human Shaped Raccoon, and I hope to see you in the next one, whenever that is.